Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Friday Night Drive Western Suburbs podcast. I'm Josh Welge, joined here on Tuesday afternoon by Joel Boenitz. Joel, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I mean, it's the end of October. The leaves are finally starting to change color. The weather's starting to get a little bit cooler. And it's truly starting to feel like it's time for some playoff football in the midst.
Yep, it's that time of year. I mean, in the World Series, life is good, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. We're a podcast, so that'll be my one name drop. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely, for high school football purposes, this is definitely, for my money, it's the most exciting week of the year because I love the NCAA tournament and March Madness and Selection Sunday, and this kind of is like our version of that because everybody is gearing up to try to get into the playoffs and then finding out who they're supposed to play and who are we playing and where are we going. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun for fans, players. It's a lot of fun for us. So thanks everybody for joining us. We'll talk a lot about some of the games that are coming up this week. But first, kind of want to take a step back and look at some of the games that we were following last week. Some big games playoff wise, some big games conference wise. Joel, I'm going to start with the game Lions Township playing York, game that basically decided a West Suburban Silver. And I remember a couple weeks ago we were kind of sitting here and it was like, all right, there's three teams that are really in contention in West Suburban Silver because they're all undefeated going into like week 6. And honestly, maybe it's recency bias, but I feel like I kind of had Lions maybe third on that list, and they totally proved me wrong. I mean, we make picks for Friday Night Drive, and I feel like I don't want to pick against Lions again because I think they've earned my trust. But really impressive win over York, 24-7, going on the road. Their defense forced 3 turnovers. Danny Carroll, really good running back for theirs. He ran for over, I think, 130 yards and 3 touchdowns. And unlike the Downers Grove North game where they really had to come back and come from behind and win a 1-pointer, they were in control of that game pretty much throughout. And in doing so, they clinched their first outright silver title since 1987. And they actually can go for their first 9-0 regular season this Friday since 1943. Which, I mean, they've had some really good teams at Lions over the years. I know Ben Bryant, who's the quarterback that's kind of floating around NFL circles. He played for Northwestern. He played for them a few years ago. They've had some really good players, but man, that's a really nice feather in their cap to be able to win that West Suburban. And they're now one of only, I believe, 27 undefeated teams left in the state. And if 8A is a little bit more wide open than it has been in recent years, maybe not, but they're going to be in the picture. They've really been impressive the last few weeks.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you kind of mentioned it. We kind of picked them to be like, the ones losing those 2 games against Downers Grove North and York. But I mean, they proved us wrong, like you mentioned. And it seemed like the defense really stepped up for them in both of those games. I mean, obviously, in the Downers Grove North game, stepped up in order to make sure that they can have their comeback against the Trojans last week. But this week, it looked like they were in full control the entire way through. And so, really impressive showing from Lions over these past couple of weeks. And, obviously on Friday as well. And it should be interesting to see if they can keep it or if they can keep the streak going, go to 9-0 for their first undefeated regular season since 1943. And, you know, who knows? We can see how far they go. Because, like you mentioned, 8A is a little bit more wide open than it was, in recent years, especially with, teams like Loyola kind of falling off of the trail in that. So it should be really interesting to see how this team, goes through the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I mean, it could turn out that Loyola and Lincoln East are playing each other in the final again, and then maybe 8A is not as wide open as we thought. But I do think that regardless, Lions is going to be a team that's going to be, a factor in the 8A playoffs, when we go into it in another week or so. Another team that I think is going to be a factor in the 8A playoffs that's still undefeated, that they won their conference title again last Friday. A game that I was at, Oswego playing Minooka, a game that in recent years has been very competitive games, very compelling games that have decided the conference. And I thought it was going to be that way again. I mean, it was 7-0 against 6-1, and I was wrong again. Oswego just really dominated that game. Final score was 42-10. Manuka's only touchdown came in the last minute when Oswego's backups were in. So for all intents and purposes, they only give up a field goal. And again, as all year long, their defense really dominated. Manuka's first 5 possessions, they only had 1 first down, and it came on an Oswego penalty. They'd only given up 12 yards the first 5 possessions. By that time, the game was already 28-0 for Oswego. Easton Ruby, the third of a very talented linebacking group, had a couple interceptions that set up touchdowns. Jeremiah Kane, really talented wide receiver for them, caught a couple touchdowns for them. Just a really impressive win for Oswego to be able to win that game, to win the conference, first conference title in a full. They did win the COVID season, the shortened season, but the first conference title in a shortened season, or a full season rather, since 2018. And again, I mean, they have Oswego East this week, so no gimmies there in the rivalry game, but they could be looking at an undefeated regular season as well. And again, I mean, when you have a defense like that, I mean, they always say like a defense travels in the playoffs, and I think that's the case with them. They're going to be a team to watch out for in 8A to maybe make a run. I really like that Oswego team a lot.
Man, do you remember last week when we said that game was probably going to be a really low-scoring game? Yeah, I guess Oswego heard it and said, "No, it's not. We're going to score a lot." So, I think that was the game that really proved that they can live up to the hype of not just their defense playing really well, but their offense playing really, really well as well. Because we kind of mentioned how they've been a kind of low-scoring team over these past couple of weeks, but still pulling off these wins. And, they really showed that, they can still blow out, really good teams like Manuka. So, really impressive showing from them. And it, once again, should be really interesting to see how it comes whenever it comes to the playoffs next week.
Yeah, I will say, and take nothing away from their offense, because their offense made some plays. I mean, three of their touchdowns came off of interceptions where they had a short field to work with. Then Manuka had a short field that set them up in midfield. So again, their offense definitely performed, but it starts with their defense. Their defense put them in position where they could score points, and then they're able to go out and execute and make the plays and score 42 points. I mean, 42 points is 42 points. I mean, that was a very good game. Probably Oswego's most impressive game since that Joliet Catholic win that they had in week 2. So a really good one there. Oswego winning that game. Congratulations to them on winning the conference title. A game that you were at last Friday, Batavia, Wheaton Warrenville South, and kind of the story in that game that I thought, and you wrote about it, is Batavia obviously getting a win, and Nathan Whitwell getting back on track running the football.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a game where, he got back to the form that he was in for the first 6 weeks of the season. I mean, he ended up with 174 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns, which is the second most he's had since its 5 touchdown performance a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, no, it was a really impressive showing from, that offense. And it looks like, they finally got things going for sure on that rushing offense for the first time since before that game against Geneva. So it really was an impressive showing. And I mean, besides that, defense also looked really strong as well. They only gave up 2, big pass plays that ended up leading 2 touchdowns for Wheaton Warrenville South. But besides that, they shut everything else out. I mean, I think they held Wheaton Warrenville South to under 0 rushing yards, so negative rushing yards in that game. So another great showing for them on the ground, especially against a guy like Owen York, who had over 270, total yards the week before. So a really impressive showing from Batavia all around.
Yeah, the good win for them, and they still have a chance at and maybe getting a share of their conference title, I believe, right? Are there? I know Geneva's in a lead, but if St. Charles North throws the monkey wrench in that, then then we're looking
at tie.
right. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But good win for Batavia. Another good win from a team that week 7 they really had the eye-opening win, and then they backed it up to clinch that playoff berth at Burlington Central. I'm talking about they went out, they took care of business, they handled Hampshire pretty handily. I mean, Jackson Alcorn didn't throw for 400 some yards, but he still made some plays. LJ Kerr, who's a really good receiver for them, he made some plays. And really fascinated to see Burlington Central and what they can do once they get the playoffs started, because they've been really competitive in a good Fox Valley conference.
Yeah, definitely. And I think they're going to be the team that is going to be the feel good story throughout the entire playoffs. Because obviously, this is going to be the first time being in the playoffs since 2014, and they're going to be looking for their first playoff win since 2006. So it's been a long time since Burlington Central has seen the success that they've had. And from the way that the team has been playing over these past couple of weeks, especially against Prairie Ridge, who's been a top team in the 6A for a little bit. It's going to be really interesting to see how they play throughout the playoffs and how far they could potentially go as well. So I'm really excited to see what they can do. I'm really excited to see what Jackson Alcorn can do, LJ Kerr, and all of those players there. And there may be a chance that they can break that streak this year.
No doubt. I mean, Burlington Central is a school too that, I mean, their basketball programs had a lot of success over the last decade. Their baseball program has been really good. They had a really good spring. So, and again, the football program it's been competitive in the Fox Valley Conference since it joined it a few years ago. It's just been being able to get to that, 5 or potentially 6 wins that they haven't quite got there. But they've been knocking on the door and they've been competitive in that league. And now they're in, and, they got a great quarterback. So again, I'll be really fascinated to watch to see, how far they can go with this. I mean, it's really exciting. I'm also kind of curious to see Jackson Alcorn. I know their coach last week said he's the best quarterback in state that nobody's heard of. Kind of curious to see about like what colleges are kind of knocking on this door. Because man, when you put up like 400 some yards against Prairie Ridge, you got to be doing something right. So I'm really, really curious on that one as well. So good things going up there in Burlington Central. Joe, you mentioned a minute ago about Burlington Central being a feel-good story this year, and Sandwich was that last year, being able to get to the playoffs, get to the quarterfinals. After 2 years ago, they didn't even have football because of numbers. They've been able to follow it up with another really good year, and they were able to basically put them position-wise playoffs. They got their 5th win last week, so they're in really good shape playoffs-wise. And really a really fun game. They went up to Woodstock North, who was 6-1 coming in. Back and forth game. They were down early. They were able to rally. They tied the game. And then the interesting thing to me, and I talked about it with their coach and their quarterback for my football notebook for Kendall County, is they're really a team that they run that wing tee offense that it's, they'll go 12 plays, 15 plays. They'll run it 7 minutes, 8 minutes off the clock. They got the ball in that game with about 1:15 left. And they went in 2-minute drill, and they were able to score in about 30 seconds. They had 2 big passes by their quarterback, Brady Behringer, and then Brady Behringer, he had the big pancake block for Nick Michaelik to score the game-winning touchdown. And I was just very fascinated that a team like that really they want to take time off possession, that time off the clock, that they're able to score that quickly. And it's funny, I talked to them about it, and they said they practice that every week on Thursday nights. They're not on their practice field. They actually go into their football stadium and football field, and they work on that 2-minute drill where the coach is on the field saying, stop the clock. They got the clock going and stuff like that. So it's interesting for a team that typically for most of the game, they don't do that kind of thing, that they did it so well in that situation. So a really good win for Sandwich.
Yeah, it's really rare to see, a team that heavily relies on rushing the ball and keeping the clock moving to be able to get something like that down to almost a science. And it looks like what they've been doing there has been really working for them, and especially over these past couple of weeks. I mean, obviously they've been 5-1 since starting off the season 0-2, so everything's kind of seemed to be working for Sandwich over these past couple of weeks, and they are looking like the same team that pretty much everybody fell in love with last year. So it'll be really interesting to see if they can repeat that same performance whenever it comes to in the playoffs.
Yeah, really good. I mean, they're a team that, typically they throw the ball maybe once or twice per game by accident. And then, when they really needed it, they were able to make the plays throwing the ball. So good thing for them. A team that doesn't throw the ball by accident, a team that throws the ball a lot and throws it quite well, is Geneva High School. And their quarterback, Tony Chahino, he had a game in week 8. I think he threw 6 touchdown passes against St. Charles East. Man, that kid has really, really been a story for Geneva this year. Kind of a question mark going into the year about who their quarterback was going to be. They had a lot of talent at receiver with Talon Taylor. He has answered everything this year.
Yeah, I mean, if we were just talking about, of course, the feel-good team, I think the story of Tony Chihino has been, the feel-good person story of, the entire year, not just for, the entire King County, but probably for the state of Illinois. I mean, obviously, this guy came in, he was on varsity since his sophomore year, but he played in pretty much every other position besides quarterback. I mean, he was a fullback and a linebacker last year. He was playing everything but he has come into that role as a quarterback, and he has just excelled in multiple ways, in multiple games for them. I mean, he has 31 passing touchdowns this year. He only has one interception, which I mean it's a great margin to have that. And I mean, having talented receivers like Talon Taylor and Finnegan Wechter and Bennett Conkey, who's coming up, that's really helped as well. But I mean, that last game against St. Charles East, the fact that was his best and it wasn't by a lot, especially after the season he's had, I mean, it just speaks so much about what type of player that Tony Chihino is.
Yeah, really good year for him and really good year for Geneva, obviously, which leads us into looking ahead to week 9, game that you're going to be off on Friday, Geneva St. Charles North. All right, so last week I said Oswego Minooka was going to be a low-scoring game, and I was completely wrong. I'm going on the record. Geneva St. Charles North, there's going to be points scored. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that is definitely going to be the case. And I mean, obviously we've talked about, St. Charles North and Batavia, and then we talked about Batavia and Geneva. We talked about those games, about how different the games are going to be on each side. This time, I think the game plan on offense is going to be very similar because their offenses run in a very similar way. They both have a really talented quarterback. They have a talented running back who isn't the main center of their entire offense, but can hurt you in multiple ways if you, kind of shrug them off. Joel Holloman's proved that multiple times. Michael Romoro's proven that multiple times. Then also on top of that, they each have a wide receiver who is the main center of, the offense. You've got Talon Taylor, obviously, on Geneva, and then you've got Keaton Ranke on St. Charles North, who is slowly but surely, I shouldn't say slowly but surely, kind of under the radar. He's been putting up very similar numbers to Talon Taylor this year. I think he has 900 receiving yards so far this season, which is right around the same mark as Taylor. And he has, I believe, 14 total touchdowns on the season as well, which, is right there with Talon Taylor. So both of them have really talented offenses heading into this game. And I'm really excited to see, which offense can execute their game plan better. And, like you mentioned, I think points are going to be scored in this game, and I think this is going to be a really high scoring game, and it's going to be really interesting to see, who comes out on top and ultimately who decides the Duquesne Conference. So that is one thing that I said at the beginning of the season, that this game was going to decide who wins the Duquesne Conference, and that is one thing I am happy to say I have gotten right. So
you nailed that one. I mean, Batavia could have been like, no, we're just going to go undefeated, and this game wouldn't mean quite as much, but it certainly means a lot. So that's going to be a game that Friday, when you're there, I'll probably be checking every 5 minutes, and there'll be another touchdown. So we'll see. I'm looking forward to that one. A game that I'm going to be on Friday, Oswego East, a game that always means quite a bit. Obviously, a rivalry game. Crosstown rival. Oswego, mentioned before, they can go for the undefeated season. They're in the playoffs. No worries. Everything's good. They just have to know who they're playing. They'll find out Saturday. Oswego East, a little bit of a different situation. They started the season 0-2. They were 2-4. They've been able to really, to their credit, they've been able to rally and really put it together. They got back-to-back wins the last couple weeks. They beat Bolingbrook. They beat Yorkville to put themselves in a position where they're 4-4 now. If you look at Steve Susi, he projects every week, they may be one of those teams that even if they lose this week to go to 4-5, they might be able to still get into playoffs. But man, would it feel good if they could, number one, get into the playoffs and get into playoffs breathing easy and get into playoffs breathing easy by beating their crosstown rival. Now, easier said than done, because Oswego East offense has been, I'm just going to say, it's a little bit inconsistent this year. and they're going up against probably the best defense they're going to see all year, Oswego. Now, that being said, Oswego's East quarterback, Nico Valachi, is coming off probably the best game of his varsity career last week against Yorkville. He had over 300 yards of total offense, had a few touchdowns as well. So he's got to be feeling pretty good about that. But again, that Oswego defense is going to be very difficult, but we'll see. I mean, last year I covered a week 9 game where Plainfield North lost. They fell to 4-5, and they were doing hugs and handshakes afterwards like their season was over. Next thing you knew, they were in the playoffs. So, I mean, I would be curious to see if Oswego East doesn't win Friday, what they're going to be like. But obviously, it's a game that means a lot on both sides, Oswego and Oswego East. Another game that I'm kind of curious about, scoreboard watching for sure on Friday. Two teams that are definitely in the playoffs. I believe so. St. Francis, yeah, they're in good shape. I lose track sometimes. But St. Francis, Nazareth, that was a game last year but another one of those high scoring games. I think it's going to be that way again. Nazareth, great quarterback, Logan Malachik. But St. Francis, man, Brady Palmer has had a really nice year for them. He's got a lot of weapons. They're coming off a really good win against DePaul Prep too. So, I know Nazareth seems to be they're kind of in juggernaut mode right now. I mean, they put up 62 points against Bennett last week, but St. Francis, I think they got a game in them on Friday.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, St. Francis is just, one delay of game penalty away from being 7-1 as well. So, they've kind of built up their own resume as well. And I mean, obviously, last year, not just the first game to decide who won, the conference in which St. Francis won, but I mean, both of the games that they played were really close, really high scoring, and really fun to watch. So it should be interesting to see if the same thing happens this week. Is St. Francis going to win just like they did in week 9 last season, or is Nazareth going to continue the streak like they did whenever they defeated St. Francis in the Class 5A state semifinals last year? So it should be interesting to see what happens.
Actually, I think Nazareth beat them both times last year. They beat them in week 9 to get to the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that because they started the season. Oh, wait, I forget. They started the season 0-4.
I'm pretty sure St. Francis won 35-17.
Did they? Okay, all right. Okay.
Yes.
I was wrong about that. My mind's getting hazy. I do know that semifinals. So.
We have too much football in us. It's okay.
Football, but it should be a lot of fun. And again, I expect to be a high scoring game between those teams. So, we'll see about that. A lot of teams in our area that are kind of just fighting, scratching and clawing to get into the playoffs this week. That either they need to win or, maybe they're in a better position because they got, more playoff points and stuff. One of them that stands out to me, I mean, I see Catholic Prep, a team that they haven't missed the playoffs, I don't believe, since 2014. In fact, I don't think they've got any worse than the quarterfinals since 2014, which is pretty impressive. Now, that being said, they're 4-4 right now. They've got a couple wins back-to-back, so they're feeling a little bit good about themselves. But, man, they got to play St. Rita this Friday, and that is a tough assignment if you want to get that 5th win. I think they got the playoff points that if they don't get that 5th win, they're probably maybe in the playoffs anyway. But, boy, would they like that win Friday. And then Marmion, different situation but similar in that, they don't really have the playoff points, so they probably – feel like they want to get that 5th win even more. And they got a little bit easier assignment with Leo on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's kind of been the story of like, if they will they get in their first year under Adam Guerra, and it looks like it's a pretty set stone for them to get in. If they win, not only do they win their conference, they also, get that 5th win, which, it doesn't secure a place in the playoffs, but in recent years it does. So, it should be interesting to see if they can pull that off. They do have to go on the road for it. So, I mean, you never know. Week 9 madness always happens. So we'll see what happens. But, they're looking pretty solid for the most part.
Yeah, and a couple other teams that I'm watching, both of them in West Suburban Silver. Hinsdale Central. They got Downers Grove North this week. Obviously, that's a big rival. They play for that. I think it's the Old Oaken Bucket that they play for everywhere. It's always, kind of a rivalry game, but Hinsdale Central comes in 4-4. So they're in a position where, they'd love to get that fifth win. I mean, they do have 40 playoff points. It's okay. Maybe could be better. A fifth win would be nice, but could be a tough assignment against Downers Grove North. And then kind of, a storyline I've been following all season. Glenbard West, they've never missed the playoffs under Chad Hetlett. He's in his 17th. They've made 16 consecutive playoff appearances under Coach Hetlett. They started the season 0-4. They've been able to rally a little bit. They're 3-5, but they have very good playoff points. They actually play Saturday, not Friday night. So I talked to Steve Susi earlier this week, and I'm like, are they going to know if they're in the playoff field going into that game? And he thinks yes. So so they play Oak Park River Forest on Saturday. It's a game that, pay on paper, they should feel pretty good about it. But obviously a chance to get that fourth win and potentially get in the playoffs, and then a long road trip to wherever they're going. A road trip nonetheless. But but we'll see. I mean, Glenbard West, like IC Catholic, has been a real main staple of playoff teams around here. So it'd be really weird if either of them were not in the playoffs. I have a feeling both are going to end up getting in, but we'll see what happens. A lot of interesting stuff. Any other games that you're kind of looking forward to week 9?
Yeah, just kind of going off of the same, kind of thing that you were talking about. Those teams that are like right on the edge of making the playoffs. You got both of the Wheaton schools in Duquesne Conference, Wheaton North and Wheaton Warrenville South. Both of them are 4-4 heading into this final game. Both of them have kind of easy games, I would guess. Wheaton Warrenville South is going to be facing off against St. Charles East, who hasn't had the best success as of recently. To be fair, they've also been facing off against, some of the best teams in the Duquesne Conference, so that's probably part of the reason why. But, I mean, I wouldn't count them out considering how they played earlier in the season, especially against a team like Wheaton North. So should be interesting to see there. And then Wheaton North is going to be facing off against Lake Park this week. They got to 4-4 after getting an overtime victory over Glenbard North last week. So, like I mentioned, anything can happen in this week 9 slate. And, it should be interesting to see how they play up against, Lake Park and see if they can get to that 5-4 spot. If both teams can get to that 5-4 spot. So those are going to be 2 games that I'm also going to be looking at throughout my game.
Yeah, BNC. I mean, the Duquesne Conference is locked in with 3 teams in the playoffs already, with the potential Wheaton Warrenville South and Wheaton North. I know Lake Park is 3-5. Their playoff points are kind of, so I'm not sure if 4-5 is going to be enough for them, but there's obviously, they have a lot to play for to be able to get to 4-5. So, that's definitely going to be some games I'm scoreboard watching on Friday. A lot of good stuff. Looking forward to it. Just want to invite everybody to keep following us this week. I'll be back here tomorrow talking to Steve Susi, previewing the big week 9 games around the state. And then JT Petaldy and Eddie Carriffio will be back on Thursday for their podcast. And then leading up to Friday night, Steve Susi and Matt Rodewald will be here from 9:30 to 11, breaking it down. If it's like last year, Steve will probably still be on until 2 a.m, looking into his playoff projections. You want to get them here. We'll have his projections throughout the week and into Saturday as well. So a lot of good stuff. Joel, anything else before we sign off?
Let the madness begin.
Let the madness begin. Exactly. Again, for Joel Boenitz, I'm Josh Welge. Thanks a lot for joining us.